If you've ever tried to lose fat, you have probably asked the same question everybody does at some point. Which diet is best? Depending on who you ask and what is currently the flavor of the week, you'll get a different answer almost every time. One week it's keto, the next week it's low fat. Then someone swears the carnivore diet changed their life. Another person insists intermittent fasting is the secret everyone is missing. With so many conflicting opinions, it is completely understandable to feel stuck, frustrated, and unsure which approach to trust. The reality is that most popular diets can work. The problem is not that people choose the wrong diet. The problem is that they choose a diet they cannot stick to long enough for it to matter. Before breaking down specific approaches, it is important to understand the foundation they all rely on. Fat loss requires a sustained energy deficit. In simple terms, you must consistently consume fewer calories than your body uses over time. This principle applies regardless of whether those calories come from fat, carbohydrates, or protein. Research consistently shows that when calories and protein intake are matched, the differences in fat loss between diet styles become very small. What matters far more than macronutrient ratios is adherence. The diet you can follow consistently is the one that will produce long-term results. With that in mind, let us look at the most common approaches people feel confused about. Let's start with a ketogenic diet. The ketogenic diet is high in fat, moderate in protein, and very low in carbohydrates. The goal is to shift the body into a metabolic state called ketosis, where fat-derived ketones are used as the primary fuel source instead of glucose. So what's the potential benefits? Keto can be effective for people who naturally prefer fatty foods and feel more stable when carbohydrates are kept low. Because the body is already adapted to using fat for fuel, it may help preserve lean mass during a calorie deficit. It also pairs well with fasting approaches, as energy production remains relatively stable even when food intake is low. Another advantage is that ketosis can be measured through blood or breath ketones, which some people find motivating and reinforcing. That being said, there are some potential downsides. The transition into ketosis can be uncomfortable, especially during the first 1 to 2 weeks. Some individuals experience fatigue, brain fog, or flu-like symptoms during this period. Low carbohydrate intake can also reduce training performance for people who rely on higher intensity exercise. Social eating becomes more difficult as many common foods do not fit easily into a ketogenic framework. There is also the risk of micronutrient deficiencies if fruits, vegetables, and fiber-rich foods are heavily restricted, which may require careful food selection or supplementation. So, who stands to benefit the most from this diet? Keto often works the best for people who prefer structured rules, enjoy high-fat foods, and are comfortable limiting food choices. It tends to be harder for people who enjoy variety, train intensely, or often find themselves in social situations. Now let's take a look at low-fat diets. Low-fat diets reduce dietary fat while allowing higher carbohydrate intake. Although they receive less attention than keto, they have been studied extensively. When calories and proteins are matched, research suggests that low-fat diets may have a slight advantage for fat loss in some cases. However, the difference is small and not always clinically meaningful. Low-fat approaches can work well for individuals who enjoy carbohydrates, prefer larger food volumes, and rely on fiber-rich foods for fullness. Carbohydrates can increase satiety per calorie, especially when they come from whole, high-fiber sources. The main limitation is that very low fat intake can make meals less satisfying for some people and may be difficult to sustain long term. Up next is the carnivore diet. The carnivore diet focuses almost exclusively on animal-based foods and eliminates plant foods entirely. While anecdotal success stories exist, long-term research on this approach is extremely limited. From a practical standpoint, the carnivore diet is highly restrictive and makes meeting micronutrient and fiber needs challenging. It can also significantly limit social flexibility and food variety. For most people, the lack of dietary diversity increases the risk of poor adherence over time. As with any diet, results depend on maintaining a calorie deficit, not on food elimination alone. Lastly, let's take a look at intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is not a diet, but an eating pattern. It alternates periods of eating with periods of fasting. Common forms include traditional intermittent fasting with very low intake on certain days, and time-restricted eating where all calories are consumed within a smaller daily window. So, what's the benefits compared to a more structured diet approach? Intermittent fasting can make it easier for some people to maintain a calorie deficit by reducing eating opportunities. Many people find it simpler to manage fewer meals rather than tracking smaller portions throughout the day. Some health benefits associated with fasting appear to be driven largely by reduced calorie intake rather than fasting itself. So when fasting zealots claim that they lost weight because they only eat at certain times during the day, simply know that it's not the timing but the restriction in calories that made them lose the weight. They would have gotten the same results if they ate smaller meals throughout the day but kept the calories and macros the same as when they fasted. So what's the downside to intermittent fasting, you may ask? As stated previously, when calories are matched, intermittent fasting does not outperform continuous calorie restriction for fat loss. Hunger can increase, especially with very long fasting windows or one meal a day approaches. Some individuals experience elevated stress hormones, impaired glucose tolerance, or reduced training performance. Females and individuals with high training demands may be more sensitive to these effects. Short eating windows may also limit muscle growth if maximizing hypertrophy is the goal. This leads us to the next question, and that is, who is this for? Intermittent fasting works best for people who prefer structure, are not training at very high volumes, and do not experience excessive hunger or stress during fasting periods. Now that we've looked at the most popular forms of dieting, which one's the best? The one to rule them all, so to speak. The common thread across all successful diets is not carbohydrate restriction, fat intake, or meal timing. It is consistency. The diet that works is the one you can follow while still living your life. That means it fits your schedule, your food preferences, your social life, and your stress levels. Extreme restriction often produces short-term results followed by burnout, rebound eating, and frustration. Macronutrient ratios matter far less than most people think. Protein intake should be adequate to preserve lean mass. Calories must remain appropriate for your goal. Beyond that, personalization matters more than perfection. The real skill is not finding the perfect diet. The real skill is building a nutrition approach that feels manageable on your busiest, least motivated days. Keto, low-fat, carnivore, or intermittent fasting are all tools. None of them are magic. None of them override basic physiology. If a diet helps you stay in an energy deficit consistently, meets your nutrient needs, and fits your lifestyle, it can work. If it feels miserable, isolating, or impossible to maintain, it will eventually fail, regardless of how popular it is. Sustainable results come from choosing the approach you can repeat for months, not the one that promises the fastest transformation. If you are tired of bouncing between diet trends and want a structured, flexible approach that actually fits your real life, this is exactly what Better Balance Coaching was built for. You can start with a risk-free 14-day trial and get full access to coaching support, personalized guidance, and accountability. When you sign up, you also receive the Nutrition Shortcut Bundle, a free collection of 12 science-backed booklets that break down everything you need to know about nutrition in a clear, practical way. These resources are designed to help you understand how to build a nutrition plan around your goals, your schedule, and your preferences, not someone else's extreme rules. You get to keep the entire bundle, even if you decide not to continue after the trial. If you want clarity instead of confusion and progress instead of constant restarts, the next step is simple. Start the 14-day free trial, download the Nutrition Shortcut Bundle, and finally learn how to make nutrition work for you. Also, if you liked the video and found it helpful, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. It helps me make more informative videos such as these. See you in the next one.